My name is Rachel, and I'm 27 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been the family scapegoat. Every problem, every minor inconvenience, every single thing that ever went wrong in my family somehow ended up being my fault. If my brother failed a test, it was because I distracted him by existing. If my sister's boyfriend left her, she'd cry about how I was so lucky to be single and somehow twisted into being about me. If my mom burned dinner, she'd blame it on the stress I caused her. It didn't matter what it was. I was the convenient target, the one everyone could pile on without any consequences. I think every scapegoat has that one defining moment where they realize their family never actually loved them. For me, that moment happened at my sister Melanie's wedding. Melanie is 30, 3 years older than me. She's always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Our parents doted on her, showered her with praise, and bent over backward to make her life easier. Meanwhile, I was the family errand runner, the emotional punching bag, the one expected to be understanding when everyone else trampled over my feelings. It was just the way things were. So when Melanie got engaged last year, it wasn't exactly surprising that my parents expected me to contribute financially. My family has money, but not enough to throw a luxurious wedding without some help. Since I have a stable job and have been smart with my finances, they assumed I would just pay up. And stupidly, I agreed. At the time, I thought maybe this was my chance to finally be accepted. Maybe if I helped out, they'd see me as more than just their family scapegoat. I promised to cover half of the wedding costs. It wasn't a small amount. Melanie wanted a fancy venue, an expensive dress, and a long guest list. The total was well over $40,000, which meant my share would be at least $20,000. But I told myself it was fine. It was for family. And even if they didn't treat me well, I still wanted to believe I could fix things. But, of course, I should have known better. The disrespect started small in ways I could almost brush off. I wasn't included in the wedding planning. My opinions weren't asked for. When I did try to give input, Melanie would wrinkle her nose and say something like, "Oh, that's not really the vibe I'm going for," and move on like I hadn't spoken. The bridesmaids' dresses were picked without consulting me, despite me being one of them. Every little decision was made by Melanie, our mom, and a few of Melanie's friends. I was just there to write a check. I tried not to let it bother me too much. But things escalated quickly. At the bridal shower, I arrived with a thoughtful gift, a personalized scrapbook of memories from our childhood, filled with photos, little notes, and heartfelt messages. Melanie barely glanced at it before setting it aside. Meanwhile, when our cousin gifted her a generic scented candle, Melanie gushed about how thoughtful it was and how much she loved it. I felt humiliated. But, again, I bit my tongue. The real breaking point, though, was at the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding. It was a fancy event at a high-end restaurant, with extended family and close friends in attendance. Everyone was drinking, laughing, celebrating. I was trying to enjoy myself despite feeling out of place, but then the seating arrangements were revealed. At the center of the long banquet table, Melanie and her fiancé sat, surrounded by our parents, his parents, and the bridal party. Meanwhile, I was placed at the far end, as if I were an afterthought. But the real kicker? When I arrived at my seat, I saw that each place card had been handwritten in elegant calligraphy. And mine? Mine said, in clear black ink, "The Failure." I thought it was a joke at first. A cruel, unfunny joke. But when I glanced around, I saw my mom smirking at me from across the table. "Well," she said, swirling her drink. "It's honest." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A few people nearby chuckled awkwardly, not wanting to draw attention to the tension. My dad didn't even look up from his plate. Melanie? She just sipped her champagne, as if my humiliation was completely normal. Something inside me snapped. I had spent my whole life trying to earn my family's love, trying to prove my worth to people who would never see me as anything more than their scapegoat. I had given them kindness, understanding, and even financial support, yet they still treated me like I was nothing. Well, if I was nothing to them, then they were nothing to me. I stood up, grabbed my glass, and tapped it with my fork. The sound rang out through the restaurant, catching everyone's attention. Conversations hushed. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "I'd like to make a toast to the last words you'll ever hear from me." A ripple of confusion passed through the guests. My mom's smirk faltered. Melanie frowned. My dad finally looked up, blinking at me like he hadn't been paying attention this whole time. I held up my glass, let the silence stretch for a moment, then slowly lowered it back to the table. Without another word, I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper and a pen, wrote something on it, and placed it neatly next to Melanie's plate. Then, I turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't stop. Not when I heard murmurs behind me, not when my mom scoffed, not when Melanie hissed, "What is her problem?" I just kept walking, my heart pounding but my step steady. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I smiled to myself because I knew that the moment someone opened that paper, the real shock would begin. I had written, in bold, unmistakable letters, "I am no longer paying for the wedding. Enjoy the bill." For a few blissful moments, I stood outside the restaurant, breathing in the cool night air. The weight of years of mistreatment was finally lifting off my shoulders. But I knew it wouldn't last. My family wasn't the type to let go of their favorite punching bag so easily. Sure enough, the chaos started almost immediately. The restaurant doors burst open behind me, and I heard my mother's sharp, furious voice cut through the night like a knife. "Rachel." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could picture the scene perfectly. My mother, red-faced, eyes blazing with rage. My father, awkwardly standing behind her, not because he actually cared, but because he always followed her lead. And Melanie, oh, Melanie, her perfect wedding fantasy crashing down around her, her voice dripping with entitlement. I took a slow step forward. Then another. "Don't you dare walk away from us." My mother's heels clacked against the pavement as she stormed toward me. "You are not leaving like this." I stopped walking, just long enough to turn my head slightly. "Like what?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. Like someone who finally got sick of being treated like garbage. Dad finally spoke up then, his voice low and stiff. "Rachel, this is ridiculous. You're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have imagined the part where my own family called me the failure at a wedding I was supposed to help pay for." I turned to Melanie, who had finally made her way outside, her fiancé trailing behind her, looking uncomfortable. What was the plan here, Mel? Humiliate me, take my money, and then pretend I don't exist? Melanie scoffed, flipping her hair like this was just some minor inconvenience. "Oh my God, Rachel, it was a joke. Lighten up." "A joke?" I echoed, tilting my head. "Funny. Because the part where I agreed to pay for half of your wedding? That was a joke too." That was when she finally looked worried. "Wait, what?" I gestured back to the restaurant. "Maybe you should go check the little note I left for you." Melanie blinked, confusion giving way to full-blown panic. Without another word, she turned and ran back inside. My mother rounded on me, her voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. "You spoiled little brat," she seethed. "After everything we've done for you, you would pull something like this? Do you have any idea how much trouble you just caused?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated. "You mean the years of insults? The constant blame? The way you never once stood up for me?" I took a step closer. "Tell me, Mom, if I'm such a failure, why did you all expect me to pay for this wedding?" For once, she had no response. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. And then, from inside the restaurant, I heard the sound of Melanie screaming. "What is wrong with you?" A slow smirk crept onto my face. Guess she finally read my note. Melanie came storming back outside, her eyes wild with panic. "You can't do this," she spat, waving the piece of paper in my face. "You promised." "I did promise," I admitted. "But then you called me a failure. And, well, you can't expect a failure to come up with 20 grand, can you?" Melanie made a strangled noise, like she was physically trying to stop herself from screaming again. "You don't understand," she said, her voice high and desperate. "The venue is booked. The caterers are paid. The dress, the flowers, the photographer, it's all finalized. Guess you should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate the person funding half of it." Her fiancé finally spoke up then, rubbing his temples like he was getting the world's worst migraine. "Babe," he muttered, we don't have the money to cover this." Melanie whipped around to glare at him. "Well, obviously we don't, David," she snapped. "What do you expect me to do? Call off the wedding?" I shrugged. "Not my problem." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, my family's outraged voices fading behind me. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because I also knew exactly what my mother was going to do next. She was going to try and manipulate me, guilt-trip me, maybe even lie to the venue and vendors, pretending my check was just delayed. And when all else failed, she would try to ruin me. Fine, let her try. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one getting walked all over. I was going to be the one watching them crash. As I walked down the street, The sound of my family's desperation echoed in my ears. I could feel the rage building behind me, but I didn't look back. I had spent too many years looking over my shoulder, apologizing for things I never did, pretending to be something I wasn't just to keep the peace. Today, I was done, but that didn't mean they were. Just as I turned the corner, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from my sister, but the screen lit up with my mom's number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Rachel, her voice came through, sharp and frantic. Where are you? I'm walking away from a mess you created. My words were colder than I intended, but I couldn't help it. Don't bother trying to guilt trip me back. You can't do this, she said, her voice trembling now. You promised to pay for half, Rachel. Do you know what's going to happen if you don't come through? The whole wedding will be ruined. Maybe you should have thought of that before you dragged my name through the mud. I could hear her struggling to keep it together, but there was no holding back now. Please, just come back. I don't want to deal with this. It's too much. She paused, and I could tell she was fighting back tears. I don't know how we'll fix this without you. I'm not fixing anything for you. I'm done, I said, my resolve hardening with every word. You don't get to treat me like a punching bag and then expect me to come running when you call. Rachel, please, her voice cracked. I'm begging you. The begging, the pleading, it was all so predictable. She had done this before, tried to manipulate me into doing what she wanted when everything fell apart. But this time, I wasn't going to fall for it. I'm sorry, I said, letting the finality of my words sink in. But I'm not coming back. You'll have to figure it out without me. I hung up before she could say anything else. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension of the last few days start to leave me. This wasn't my problem anymore. But I wasn't naive enough to believe they were going to give up that easily. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my dad. Call me now. It's urgent. I rolled my eyes. They were really starting to get desperate now. I wasn't in the mood to deal with him, but something told me this was going to be the last straw. If I answered, it was likely going to be another round of manipulation. But I couldn't let it go. I tapped the screen and called him back. Rachel, my dad's voice came through, smooth as always, but there was an edge to it that wasn't there before. We need to talk about this situation. What situation? I asked, my tone flat. The situation where I'm being treated like the family failure? He sighed, and I could hear the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. Look, this isn't just about the money. It's about your sister's big day. Melanie's devastated. Funny, I said with a bitter laugh, because I remember her being pretty devastated when she decided to humiliate me at the wedding. You know, calling me the failure in front of everyone? How's that for family support? Rachel, this is not the time, he said, his voice rising slightly. She's already had a meltdown, and we can't fix it if you don't come back and do what you promised. I felt my patience slipping. I didn't promise to be a doormat. There was a long pause, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. Then, in a voice so low it almost seemed like he was speaking to himself, he said, She's right, you know. You were the failure. We've all been trying to cover for you, but it's always the same, isn't it? You've never been good enough. Always making excuses. You were supposed to pay for half of this wedding, Rachel. This was your chance to show you could contribute. But you're just proving them right. His words hit harder than I expected, and for a moment, I felt the weight of all those years of disappointment settling in my chest. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not now. Not after everything. I took a deep breath and said the words I should have said years ago. You know what, Dad? I don't care what you think of me anymore. You can't keep blaming me for everything. I'm not your scapegoat. His voice flared with anger, but I cut him off before he could respond. This is where I draw the line. You've crossed it. I'm not coming back, and I'm not paying for any part of this wedding. Figure it out without me. I ended the call before he could say another word. I stood there for a moment, the weight of my decision settling over me. I had finally taken control, finally stood up for myself. But I knew this wasn't the end of it. This was just the beginning. I turned to head back home, feeling the first real sense of freedom I'd had in years. They were desperate now, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to make me feel guilty again. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let them break me anymore. The next few days were a blur of angry messages and desperate phone calls. My family was in full-blown panic mode, trying to salvage what was left of the wedding. I watched from a distance as their carefully constructed facade began to crumble. It didn't take long for the reality of my withdrawal to set in. The perfect wedding that my sister had envisioned was already on the brink of falling apart without me. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened. One evening, as I was sitting in my living room, a loud knock on my door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not the people who had caused so much chaos in my life. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was about to come. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there they were, my mom, dad, and my sister, Melanie, standing on my doorstep. I tried to keep my face neutral, but the sight of them, especially Melanie's tear-streaked face, made it difficult. They looked like a broken family, desperate and defeated. "Rachel, we need to talk," my mom said, her voice tight with anger. "You've caused a disaster. The wedding's in ruins, and it's all your fault." I crossed my arms, standing in the doorway, making no move to let them inside. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about," I said, my voice cold. "You've made your position very clear. I'm the problem. I'm the failure. You don't get to come to me for help now." Melanie, the supposed victim in all this, stepped forward, her hands trembling. "This isn't fair, Rachel. You promised. You promised you'd help. This wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you ruined it. You ruined everything." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. "I didn't ruin anything," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You're the one who made it about me. You're the one who chose to humiliate me in front of everyone. Don't you dare come here now acting like I'm the villain in this story." Mom stepped in before Melanie could respond, her tone sharp and threatening. "You don't get to walk away from this, Rachel. You promised to pay for half of that wedding, and because of you, everything is falling apart. We've been covering for you for years, but we can't do it anymore. You need to make this right." I shook my head slowly, feeling the weight of all the years I'd spent trying to live up to their expectations. "I did make it right," I said, my voice finally rising with the anger that had been building inside me. "I'm not going to be the one you blame anymore. I'm done with this. I'm done with all of you." "You can't be done, Rachel," my dad said, his voice now pleading. "You're family. We're all you have." He took a step forward, his face a mask of desperation. "Please, we need you. This wedding, this was supposed to be a fresh start. Don't you want to fix things? Don't you want to be part of this family again?" I met his gaze, unblinking. "This family? You mean the family that has always used me as the scapegoat? The family that has never once considered my feelings or what I've gone through? The family that called me the failure in front of everyone? I'm not coming back to this. I've been trying to make it work for years, and every time I do, you all just tear me down again." Mom's face twisted with frustration. "You think you're the only one who's ever been hurt? You think we haven't made sacrifices for you? We've done everything for you, and this is how you repay us. By setting boundaries?" I asked, my voice firm now. "By finally standing up for myself? You're making a huge mistake, Rachel," Melanie interjected, her voice dripping with venom. "You're going to regret this. You've ruined my wedding. You've ruined everything." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You're right. I will regret this. But not in the way you think. I'll regret not doing this sooner." I could see it in their eyes, their anger, their frustration. They were trying to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty again, but I wasn't going to fall for it. Not anymore. "Rachel, you're being selfish," my dad said, his voice suddenly low, dangerous. "You think this is about you? It's about the family. It's about us. Don't you care at all?" "I've cared for far too long," I replied, my voice now cutting through the tension like a knife. "But I'm done. I'm done being the one who fixes everything for everyone else while nobody ever lifts a finger for me. I'm done pretending this toxic mess is something I need to be a part of." They stood there for a moment, stunned by my words, but I wasn't finished. "Now, I want you all to leave. I don't want to hear from any of you again." "Rachel, please," my mom started, but I cut her off. "No. This conversation is over. I'm not your punching bag anymore. I've spent my whole life being the one you all point to when something goes wrong. I've spent my whole life cleaning up after you, being the good girl, pretending like I don't have my own dreams, my own life. But not anymore. I'm done with all of you." I looked at each of them in turn, watching as the shock set in. They weren't expecting this. They weren't prepared for me to finally say, "No. Leave," I said again, my voice unwavering. Now, for a long moment, none of them moved. But then, slowly, my dad took a step back, his face filled with disbelief. Melanie, eyes wide with shock and anger, followed suit, and finally, my mom, her expression twisted with betrayal, turned away and led the way down the steps. I watched them go, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. I had finally cut the strings. I couldn't help but feel a weight lifting from my shoulders. The constant pressure of being the family's doormat, The one they always blamed and expected to fix everything. It was over. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling, like I had been living in someone else's life up until now. But now, for the first time, I felt like I was living for me. The days after the confrontation were silent. My phone stayed quiet. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe a few angry texts, some more desperate calls, but nothing came. Not at first, anyway. The silence felt louder than any argument I'd ever had with them. Then came the letters. First one from my dad, then my mom, and even one from Melanie. Each letter was filled with guilt, each one trying to pull me back in with the same old promises they'd made 1,000 times before. We're sorry. We didn't mean it. Come back and help us. We need you. They all said the same thing. The same manipulative phrases, trying to get me to feel sorry for them. But I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. I threw the letters out, one by one, without even reading them all the way through. I'd heard it all before. There was nothing left for me in that world. Now, I've been living my life, and I've never felt more at peace. Sure, it's been lonely at times, but I've started rebuilding. I've made new friends who actually care about me and aren't using me. I'm working on things I'm passionate about and just focusing on me for the first time in forever. As for my family, well, they've made it pretty clear where they stand, and I've made it equally clear where I stand. There's no going back. They tried, but I'm not the scapegoat anymore. So, here's where I stand now. No contact, no regrets. I've cut ties with the people who've kept me small and used me for their own selfish needs. And it feels incredible. I'm genuinely curious, though. For anyone who's been through something like this, how did you move on? How do you handle it when family is toxic, but they're still trying to reel you back in with guilt? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I'm honestly just navigating this one day at a time. But for now, I think I'm finally in a place where I can truly start living for myself. What would you have done? Am I being too harsh? Or is cutting toxic family off the right call? Let me know.